Now for the third part of this long review, I'll be reviewing the last 3 volumes of Green Arrow by Mike Grell. So volume 7 is called Homecoming. It is a volume that I've read before but I forgot. And anyways, I picked it up again as a sort of refresher. And this volume explores Oliver's return from his exile and this sort of... he's still coming to terms with being Green Arrow, what it means to put on the cowl and shoot at people. And he goes back to Seattle, and Dina's back. He goes back to Seattle, and Dina is thrilled to have him back. However, there's some other stuff going on. There's this Detective Kowalski doesn't like how Oliver just comes back. And the series is sort of heading back into its final climax. This is volume 7 of 9, and you can tell that the series is sort of winding down. So this volume has a lot of interesting stories, mostly about, there's one with a predator, a unspeakable monster named the Chicken Hawk. He gets released from prison and starts a rampage, and Dina wants to stop him. There's also the, which one? Pitchforks and Torches is the last story in this volume. It's probably the weakest story in the entire series. Dina and Oliver go for a hike in the countryside, and when they come back, there's this sort of political rally going on. People are against the Vietnam War, and there's this guy, a mechanic, who fought in the war, and this one side wants him to be a spokesperson to fight against the war, and another party wants him to use him as a spokesperson for the war. It's a very preachy and boring story, probably the weakest story out of all of the stories in the Green Arrow Mike Grell series. Moving on, Volume 8, The Hunt for the Red Dragon, is the last Shadow story. Shadow is a very integral part of the Mike Grell's stories. This volume explores, a rich man offers Oliver Queen a lot of money to contact Shadow because he wants to give her a lot of money because his father was one of the men who brutalized her father, and he wants to fix that legacy. However, a nasty twist finds them stranded on a sort of remote island fighting for their lives. It's a very interesting story. I think this might even predate Battle Royale, so that's an interesting story there. After that, there's a story that introduces homeless people because Marianne used to be a homeless person. So this story is it's more of a simple murder mystery, but it introduces a new character in the homeless. Oliver befriends them, and they sort of become his eyes and ears in future installments. That wasn't too bad. And then, let's see, Reunion. Reunion is the story of a band, and they're over the hill and split up, but someone's going after them. It's a simple it feels like a filler episode of TV if this was a show. It's just a simple murder mystery involving a fictional band. And then the last one is Oliver getting mixed up with this dogfighting ring and a mystical panther. It was okay. I think the best part of this story was definitely the return of Shadow. She's probably one of the coolest and most influential characters that affected Green Arrow. Moving on to Volume 9, Old Tricks. This is the last volume of all 9 volumes. This is the one that started off someone takes a shot at Oliver Queen at New Year's, and he also kisses Marianne while Dina walks in, causing a rift between them. Also, it actually ends up closing up one of the earlier plot lines from one of the earlier volumes, so that was interesting. And then, Eddie Fires comes back, and they go undercover in this really violent but enjoyable undercover story involving a ex-German commandant. And then, let's see, New Dogs. So the final story isn't that interesting. It's about Oliver going up against this cop that doesn't like him, and then the series sort of ends on a whimper, which I didn't like. However, it concludes with The Wonder Year, the 4-part series in which it's a sort of prequel story that Oliver's origin. So it shows Oliver as like a rich partying guy, and The Wonder Year is a little bit underwhelming because in other versions of Green Arrow, like Year One or the Arrow TV show, Oliver has like finding that island was like a big integral part of his character. In The Wonder Year, he basically gets drunk, falls off the boat, manages to find the bow, and just sort of shoots at animals until he survives. There's not much of a conflict in that series. It's a really dated aspect of that origin story. And then he basically gets a ride because of some marijuana dealers or growers that are on the island, and he forces them to take him back. And then he ends up wearing a green Robin Hood costume in the middle of a party where someone's trying to shoot at a man. And there's a whole political assassination attempt storyline that just really doesn't fit with the rest of the series, but The Wonder Year is definitely not the finest Green Arrow story. So that concludes the 3rd part of the Green Arrow review. The series is wonderful. I had a great time reading. I will probably eventually end up buying all of these volumes for my shelf. If you can tell, I like books and movies. The Green Arrow comic is definitely one of the more it's probably the most influential series out of all of his volumes. There's only like 5 volumes. It starts with the Neil era, and then it goes to Mike Grell, and then it switches. He comes back with Kevin Smith. That was a good version too. Then it moves hands a few more times, and then it goes really terrible in the New 52. Don't read those, but if you're a fan of Green Arrow, or you just want the definitive best Green Arrow stories, you have to check out Green Arrow by Mike Grell. The series is 80 issues, not including the Longbow Hunters, which is the first 3. And they're all collected in 9 trade paperbacks. The Longbow Hunters is probably collected on its own. You'll have to find that one first, and then find the other 9. So I know it's a big task to read 10 graphic novels, but if you're really if you like the Arrow TV show, it borrows a lot from this, I hear. And the series is wonderful. It definitely explores so many facets of its character. It's probably one of the best versions of the character in its purest form in comic book. So definitely check out Green Arrow by Mike Grell.